Well, Sony didn't have the best E3. They had technical difficulties and questionable decisions, like having that guy stroking his instrument for several minutes, and having some of the games look more like movies I'd like to watch, but not play, followed by the disastrous realization of their player base that Sony is preventing Fortnite players from playing the game on other devices. We aren't talking playing with other people on other devices, which they also disallow. We are talking about once you play Fortnite on PS4, you can only ever play it on PS4 going forward. It's been quite the show since with gems like the hashtag #FThePlayers, but the thing is, Sony is digging their grave and doesn't seem to realize it. Sony is probably planning to show and maybe release a new console in a year. It might come out in 2 or 3 years. The point is, they are prepping to hit that scary reset button and have 0 players. Microsoft is planning to have a console to show next year for sure, and they also have been buying up studios left and right too, with bullishly growing confidence. Xbox has been oozing confidence since before Sony pissed off players of one of the biggest casual hits the last half of this decade. On the other front, Sony is facing down Nintendo on a warpath with the Switch, a console with game-changing functionality that I believe is still on trajectory to outsell the PS2 in less time, and has software selling ridiculously high numbers for how many systems are currently released. Very consistently, the Switch version of a game outsells all other platforms combined. You could argue that Nintendo has captured the hardcore gamer, or created a new breed of hardcore gamer. Sony is in no position to be cocky and fill their bellies with the pride of their past success. Their two rivals are putting everything down to give Sony a run for it. When Sony is sending the 9th gen PS5 to market, they will likely be looking at Microsoft riding the wave of renewed goodwill over services like Game Pass and embracing crossplay, while also trying their best to emulate the Switch's first year schedule with as many exclusives as they can. A couple big ones they expect to sell the system, and smaller projects to appeal to smaller but very passionate audiences, rounded out by a few enhanced ports of games we've just heard of, or will hear about very soon. Nintendo very well could have about 60 million Switch consoles if their sales projections remain steady next year, and will likely have between 2,500 to 5,000 games at least announced, many having been released. And unless Sony has something portable, that function aspect may be especially tricky to overcome in much the same way they were tricky for Nintendo and Microsoft to dominate with their own PS2 and its ridiculous library. But Sony is facing that situation on steroids. They could very easily have a much more powerful system that gets slightly enhanced ports of the Switch version that is all but guaranteed to sell, in much the same way the GameCube and Xbox were held back because the PS2 was the primary target system, and even once 7th gen started, it was a wait for developers to stop porting the PS2 version to the new systems. If they don't check themselves now, Sony will be there having alienated many people with their anti-consumer antics, facing an Xbox ready to steal their thunder, and a well-established Switch. If at that moment they realize their error and embrace crossplay on the PS5, will it even matter? Will they be forgiven? Not likely. The Xbox One tried to embrace DRM to restrict your ability to play games on your terms, and when they changed their attitude a few days later, it was too late, and it's just now they are rebuilding the bridges they burned with their cocky foolishness. It's much easier to think you are the biggest chicken, too big to be challenged, and create bad blood in your cocksure arrogance, than to convince anyone you are truly sorry.